talk of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras normally centres on two aspects. One is the eightfold yogic path, Ashtanga Yoga, and the other is the siddhis, the section dealing with supernormal powers. So these are the parts that people talk about. They'll say Patanjali teaches sexual continence, or Patanjali teaches you how to levitate. Why are these the two parts that most people talk about when referring to Patanjali? The section on the Eightfold Yoga and the section on the supernormal powers. Well, the reason they talk about them, apart from any particular intrinsic interest, we're all interested in supernormal powers after all, is because there's conceptual content here. Up to this point, Patanjali hasn't given us that much in the way of stuff that we can talk about. My whole approach to this commentary is that the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are a wisdom text. And wisdom is not about conveying content, it's not about conveying information, it's about pointing us and reminding us of our own essential nature, so that we can become more and more established in that awareness, that wisdom. And this section that we're about to begin with, Sutra 28, is quite different in tone. In fact, Georg Feuerstein, who's done a translation and commentary, reckons that this is alien material. He says he considers this to be the only alien material in Patanjali's work, and we can be certain that Sutra 28 of Book 2 constitutes the beginning of this insertion, and that in all likelihood Patanjali's actual text is resumed at Sutra 9 of Book 3, if not already at Sutra 4 of Book 3. So Professor Feuerstein reckons that this material does not originate with Patanjali. And he's got a point there, he's got a point, because the tone is quite different. It's conceptual. It's not concerned with wisdom. Although, I'm not so sure about that. If this was a straightforward exposition of the Eightfold Yogic Path, it would be much more straightforward than Patanjali presents it. It seems to me that he's prompting us to look a little deeper into it, to take what might have been a conventional teaching and to look at it from the wisdom perspective. And this is the approach I'm going to take. So if you're happy with the conventional approach, that's fine, you get on with it. But if you want to look a little deeper into it and to see how this is pointing us once again to our own nature, our own essential being, then join me in this approach. Now, one of the things we should be clear about right from the start is it's the 8 limbs of yoga. It's not the 8 stages of yoga. It isn't a question of following them in sequence and perfecting each stage as you go along. You'll never get there. It's just a way of putting it off, basically. Because it's 8 limbs. To take this as a sequence, something that you have to do in order, is like saying you should only use your left hand once you've learnt to use your right hand, and you shouldn't use your hands at all until you've learnt to use your feet and legs. It's limbs, it's the limbs of the body. The limbs of yoga work together. The body is actually samadhi. This is actually the starting point of yoga, as I've said before, as I've stressed before. So although samadhi comes at the end of the list, it's what everything else supports. The limbs of yoga feed samadhi. So we should be quite clear about that right from the start. This is not a progressive course of yoga. We begin with samadhi. Yoga begins with samadhi, and the limbs of yoga support the body of samadhi. And we'll look at the actual limbs in detail in the next video.